Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non-Muslims alike to understand and handle Islam in the 21st century. We consider ourselves to be decent human beings, so we condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, misogyny, slavery, violence, anything like that. We do embrace, however, free speech and also criticism, even if it is directed at us, if it is factual and constructive criticism. We focus on Islam exclusively. So if you're curious about anything Islam, you've come to the right place. Now, we don't attack, which is aggressive, destructive, and antagonistic, neither Islam nor Muslims. We ask questions and show facts. We refute false claims and present the reality of Islam, which is political Islam. We inspect, investigate, research, analyze, and then report and critique on Islam, the ideology, not the people. Now, the live stream goes to YouTube and Facebook, and there are three ways that you can participate in this. Either you join us in the live written chat, you can join the panel during the live show, or later on watch and comment the archive. And anyone can join to comment, critique, contribute, or question. This is not a Dawa channel with censorship. Don't go to Patreon, don't go to PayPal. Everything here is free. The way we work is usually we have some news, some crazy comments, a segment where we go and read the Quran, and then a discussion on the theme of the month, followed by integrating the live chat, ending with a hadith of the week. If this is not enough Islam for you, there's still the Discord channel where you can discuss with us without anything being recorded. See you later and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. Good evening to my co-host for tonight, at least at the moment. We may have others joining us. Good evening, Cloud. How are you, my good sir?
Not too bad. Glad to be here, Rob. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I am very good, sir. It's a pleasure having you. And to everybody joining, a warm welcome to all of you. And as you may realize, our main host, Stop Spamming, is not with us tonight. Unfortunately, he had a family bereavement. So we're sending our best wishes to him for that, the recent passing, and he's just not in a good state to join us tonight. So I'll do my best to fill in. It's huge shoes, so I'll do the best I can.
Big shoes to fill.
Yes, indeed. So do share some of your comments and hopefully send some good wishes to Stop Spamming, and I'll definitely pass those on. So on that note, as I say, good evening to everybody, or good morning, or whenever you may be watching this. Tonight we are going to be doing, we were following from Stop Spamming with the pillars, the 5 pillars of Islam. We're going to take a break from that tonight because I know Stops wants to do that when he comes back. So tonight I've got a news article I want to read. We'll do sort of 10 surahs of the Quran that Cloud and I will try to decipher, as difficult as that may be. If we have somebody that joins us that from last week that might want to do the inheritance surah, then we'll do that together with him. And then we'll go on. And there was an interaction that Cloud had with some of the Muslims from Hamza's Den or EF Dawa, and we'll go through that, stop the thing, and we'll do some critique on that particular video towards the end of the show, and then I'll bring up a hadith to close us off. So on that note, Cloud, anything that you want to say here? Fire away, sir.
I think just a word of caution to anyone who generally tries to debate against Muslims is, as you're going to notice in some cases, watch for a lot of the equivocation fallacies. It seems to be some of the best things that they do, where they'll use a word, term, whatever it may be, and just mutate it as it goes along to try and bring in additional misinformations to make whatever it is they're trying to say seem into a better light.
Yeah. That's something to where, there's all these tactics, and I mentioned it before. I think I may or may not have mentioned it on the show, but I actually play devil's advocate as a Muslim. So I put myself into the mindset of that, and it was a fascinating experience to do this. And it happened on a different stream because they would just say it was sort of Christians throwing stones in a glass house, and so I just happened to defend a few points and joy. And then I did it for about 2 hours, and people were quite fascinated and said, "Oh, you did a reasonably good job." Of course, they didn't. The people didn't bring a particularly hard critique against me; otherwise, I would have had to surrender. But it was fascinating to have, as you say, the mentality. But I made sure in my mind that I wasn't going to invoke any fallacy. So if it was a case of somebody bringing something that was knocked down or extremely hard or whatever, I wouldn't do what I see the Muslims doing. I'd do the best I can, understanding the Quran and Muslim arguments to the best of my ability. And it was just a fascinating insight into how people do it. But as you say, Cloud has had some experience. I've had quite a few years of it. And so that's been a fascinating experience for all of us to hear what do people say when, they don't appear to have good reasons. What happens in the brain to do that? I'm just going to add in here. I'm presuming Rogue is from Discord, our man from Discord, is it? Or who is this at the moment?
I don't know. Rogue Lucretius?
Yes, who's that?
Hello. Hello, are you guys atheists?
It's our man Joel from Discord. Hey, Joel, good evening. Welcome.
Hello, I was invited here to do a dawah.
Yes. Your voice is just so noticeable. When you have a unique voice, it's so easy to pick it up, even when you try and hide it.
Yeah.
So I know him from Hangouts and from Discord, etc. He's done a lot, especially with Christians and stuff like that. And he certainly has a little bit on the philosophical side, and he started to look into Islam and chat to Muslims and so forth. So what we're going to do is go through this. We'll have this one story here now, and then we'll go through the Quran and see between the three of us, at least, if we can make head or tail of this, because apparently it's a clear, complete, concise, and error-free book. And we'll see if that's the case. But let me just start with one thing here, which is this article that I saw and somebody posted, right? This one here, let me go full screen on this. And, we've heard a lot about the Uyghurs in China and them being in these concentration type camps and so on. And this came up, right? And it's this lady's story about how she was living in France. She's an ex-Muslim, or possibly still a Muslim. And she went back to China. She was convinced to go back and to China to sign some papers and so forth. And the story's all here. And I'll actually post it in the main chat. And what happened to her for 2 years. And it's just shocking, right? That this is almost like kind of modern day Nazism in a sense, like in that she wasn't killed or anything, but she was tortured, and the brainwashing and stuff that goes on that she reports here in one of these camps is just eye-opening. So I encourage you, if you want to read this. So obviously I certainly, and hopefully my co-hosts here do as well, condemn any sort of behavior like this. This is just utterly ridiculous. Here's a picture actually further down. This looks like it was taken by a drone of all of them sitting outside and so forth. And she goes through how they, are kept up all night, and they have to repeat things, and then they're in classes learning. If they fall asleep, they get beaten up because they claim that they're praying and stuff like that. It's just, how she survived for 2 years is amazing. How these people survive is just incredible, right? I wondered to myself as I read through this how long I would survive trying to, live like this. So it's just something brought up my attention. But go ahead, guys.
If you can call that living.
Well, exactly right.
Jesus.
It's so needless to say, we're against any of that. We critique Islam and some Muslims, right? I'm not going to deny that I critique some Muslims, but I don't put all Muslims in one box. And there's a difference between Islam, the ideology, and Muslims. And in my experience of having spoken to probably 300 to 500 Muslims, I imagine right now, both at Speaker's Corner and online, a lot of them are better than their book. And then they have the difficulty of trying to reconcile the book with their more modern moral system. And that's where the sort of apologetics and Cloud and I were talking about it earlier. Some of the tactics come in. What do you say when you're confronted with slavery or child marriage or whatever the case is? How do you reconcile that? And that's what we see happening, more these days.
Yeah, because I find you hear a lot of them where you bring up the whole Aisha thing at 9 years old, and they'll sit there and they'll defend it tooth and nail. And then when you ask them directly, It's like, okay, so are you pro pedophilia or are you against it? And they adamantly stand back. No. A pedophile should be, castrated or killed. But then you're okay. So it's, I think, just like you said, where they're just trying to defend it in spite of their faith, or in spite. I'm not sure if that's the right word.
Yeah, well, they're obviously trying to, because they want to have the more moral view, and so if there's a way to reinterpret this, they can say, but it can also mean this. And I hear this a lot, right? I hear this from hijab, I hear this from other people. Hey, there's more than one valid interpretation. Well, is this book supposed to be clear, like Surah 3, 138 or Surah 12, 111 says? Or can this be interpreted by anybody in any way that suits their particular narrative at a particular time in history? In which case, that seems to defeat the idea that the book itself says. And so, because Surah, I used to use Surah 3, 138, which I still use, but Surah 12, 111, for example, says, there was certainly in their stories a lesson for those of understanding. Never was the Quran a narration invented, but a confirmation of what came before it, and a detailed explanation of all things and guidance and mercy for people who believe. That's Sahih International. And Yusuf Ali says, there is in their stories instruction for men endued with understanding. It is not a tale invented, but a confirmation of what went before it, a detailed exposition of all things and a guide and mercy to any who believe. Right? So to me, that seems to be fairly clear. But of course, there is another verse that says you've got to reflect on it and so forth as well. And so, they've saying, Surah 10:24, for example, and we will explain in detail the signs for a people who give thought or a people who reflect. Well, how do you establish who's reflecting? I'm trying to reflect, and I'm sure some of you guys are as well. And it seems to be a battle to understand what's going on. And having said that, I think that's a perfect lead-in. I think Jarl has dropped out there, but I think that's a perfect lead-in to having a look at some of these verses. And I'm going to ask you as well, if you can. Not that one. That's the current one. That's not the verse that I want to bring up. Let's just bring it back there, Jarl. You disappeared there for a second. Let me see if I can share the correct one here. The problem is I've got so many different ones. So I'm going to share. See if this is the correct one.
Hang on. Someone's saying that causing an echo. Pio, is that any better? Is the echo gone? Or if anyone else can hear an echo from my end?
Oh, is that on your end? I'm not hearing the echo.
Yeah.
All right, let's go through a few of these guys and see what you make of this. I'll read it out here and then, see what you understand. So we finished last week on Surah 9, Ayah 50, verse 50. And so this is 51. Sahih International, say, never will they be struck except by what Allah has decreed for us. He is our protector, and upon Allah let the believers rely. Say, nothing will happen to us except what Allah has decreed for us. He is our protector, and on Allah let the believers put their trust. So to me, that's just basically saying the trust in Allah, right? That would be my shorthand, like Stops does shorthand versions, as you guys know. Just trust in Allah, basically.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I get from that. Trust Him, He'll provide.
Oh my God, does that mean that the Chinese communists work for Allah?
Well, I don't think they would. But again, right, that's the interesting thing. You have a good point, though, because whenever you ask them about sort of evil and suffering and so forth, the response slightly differently, in a sense similar to Christians, but slightly different in the sense that they say, well, everything's a test. Well, does it apply for you and everything else? And how do you, it's almost like it's an unfalsifiable claim, because anything that happens is just a test, right? If you go out and help somebody, well, that's a test. But if you didn't help them, that would also be a test. So how do you establish what is, the question I would ask a Muslim is, how do you establish what is not a test? How could you possibly establish that? Because any action you say could just be a test. So they're saying that somebody's saying the echo is back. I don't know if it's mine or somebody else. If you guys mute up for a second, it might be coming through you, but I'm not hearing it. So Jarl and Cloud, just mute up and I'll just speak. And then let's just see if the guys, because we can establish who's creating the echo there then.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are both muted. Just let me know now with a 1 if it's clear and a 2 if there's still echo while I'm speaking. And then if Cloud, if you just unmute there while I'm still speaking, and we'll just see whether there's an echo now. So okay, so Cloud is now unmuted. So if you can do a 1 if it's clear, or 2 if there's an echo, then we know whether that's the case. And y'all, when you're ready, if you unmute, and then we can see whether that's coming up from your end, and at least we know where the echo is coming from. So pretty straightforward there, just kind of trusting Allah, I think is there we go. So y'all is now unmuted. So again, I can hear something there, y'all. So it might be on your end, right? I don't know if you've got headphones or a headset you can plug in. Now let us know with y'all, right? Rogue there. A 1 if it's clear, and 2 if there's any echo, right? So now we can establish, but I think it might be y'all that he might either have to mute himself, or he'd have to come in with headphones or something.
Was that me then, or was that somebody else?
No, I think it's y'all that might be having the echo, but he might be okay now.
Okay.
Yeah, echo now, right? So it sounds like it's y'all. So y'all, I don't know if there's anything you can do, but otherwise mute yourself. If I see you unmute and you say some words, then, Cloud and I will stop talking. Otherwise, we're going to get like background echo. So here's 952. I read it twice here, simply because SAI International and then Yusuf Ali, and between the two of them, it sometimes gives a little bit more clarity. So say, do you await for us except one of the 2 best things while we await for you, that Allah will afflict you with punishment from himself or at our hands? So wait, indeed we, along with you, are waiting. And Yusuf Ali, say, can you expect for us any fate other than one of 2 glorious things, in brackets, martyrdom or victory? But we can expect for you either that Allah will send his punishment from himself or by our hands. So wait, expectant. We too will wait with you. All right. What do you guys make of that?
I have absolutely no idea. It might just be me, but to me that sounds an awful lot like word salad.
I have to read this again. Go and say again.
I think I have to. I'm going to reread this a couple times because it just sounds like gibberish.
I mean, here's the tafsirs, right? So they talk about it. You can wait for us or save one of the 2 good things. I think it's following on from the previous verses, right? If you go out to fight, right, that because they talk about it here in Yusuf Ali about martyrdom or victory. In other words, if you go along, you can expect one of these 2 things in battle. But if you sort of stay behind, then either you're going to get a punishment from Allah or from us, right? We're going to come and do something. Let's just see here under tafsir. Al-Jalalain is normally reasonably, or at least helps a little bit. To occur, but I'm just looking at it here, to occur for us. But one of the 2 fair things, 2 fair outcomes, and that is victory. And I think waiting you two for God to afflict us with a chastisement from him, with a calamity from heaven or in our hands, should we be given permission to fight you. So this could, yeah, it seems to me, because you wouldn't be saying this to your enemies, but it might be saying it to your cohorts that you want to take along to battle.
Yeah. If it's being said in that manner, I can see that. Like I said, it's one of the 2. If you go, and if you don't, then they get punished either by them or.
Yeah.
You can expect us to face. We can expect for you that Allah will send his punishment from himself or by. Oh, okay.
You can see how it's not that easy to read, and I would bet my house and my belongings if I gave this to somebody that could understand English but had no other reference other than this book, and I said to them, read this book and tell me what you understand, and we go through it either like the whole chapter at a time or verse by verse. I think most people, if not every single human on earth, would come to certain things and they'd have absolutely no clue. And so it requires scholars, it requires hadith, it requires the sunnah and so forth in order to try and make sense of this sort of stuff. And, even in English, we could do a lot better. And if the claim is that you need to understand Arabic to get the proper, understanding, well, then that defeats the purpose of sending the message, because how many people understand Quranic Arabic? Less than 1%.
And it's like you brought up war in this, and the only thing that really gives like versus war would be the martyrdom or victory. But other than that, it's like that could be taken in any number of different ways. So it's not clear. That's the problem.
Yeah, but you will have a Muslim that might come on and say, yeah, it's clear X, Y, and Z. But if you ask them, you'll find they will have background information. They would be told X, Y, and Z, or they might have, when they say studied it, they would have heard what other humans claim that this means. And so they'll come with this background information. But it's very, as if you've ever seen that, what happens to human brains when you give them background information, right? There's that famous Michael Shermer TED Talk. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You guys probably have seen it, if I remind you, where he plays things on a recording forwards, and you can see what it is. Then he plays them backwards, and you have no clue what it just sounds like gibberish. And then he says, I'm going to play it back again. And this time he plays it back, and you can see subtitles. And your brain suddenly starts to match up some of the words to some of the gibberish, because the gibberish starts to sound a bit like those words. You go, there's a word, right? And as these subtitles comes out, it sounds like they're playing these records backwards, and there's a, quote, hidden message there. And it's just background information programming your brain.
Yep. But then, it's like I said, they're getting someone else's interpretation on it and running with that. Meanwhile, some other person is going to do the same thing, but the interpretation is different.
Correct.
So,
and the scholars differ on these as well, right? Some of there's agreement on some of the bigger issues, but on some of the more nuanced issues, there's, quite a bit of disagreement. Is that the purpose? I keep asking the question. Yeah, my sweet Satan, right? That's the one Doorknob is saying there. So, yeah, if you go look up Michael Shermer, if you type it into YouTube and type sweet Satan or TED Talk, you'll find it. And it says that it sounds like when you're playing the record, it says some of these words. But when you first hear it, right, you're completely fresh. You have no clue what it sounds like. It's just complete gibberish. And then somebody else has gone, it sounds like X, Y, and Z. And suddenly your brain goes, yeah, of course. I can see how it sounds like that now, since my brain has been programmed to help me think that. That's the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's like back in the day. It's like play Ozzy Osbourne backwards and it's messages from the devil. Like, what? No.
Yeah, exactly. Right. All right, yes, sir, 953. Sahih International say, spend willingly or unwillingly, never will it be accepted from you. Indeed, you have been a defiantly disobedient people. Yusuf Ali say, spend for the cause willingly or unwillingly. Not from you will it be accepted, for ye are indeed a people rebellious and wicked. Now, again, is this, just on first reading, is this speaking to the enemies, or is this speaking to the people that might have wanted
to know? What happened to my...
What's wrong? Okay there? I can still hear you. I don't know if you've lost speaking to us. I mean, here's the tafsirs, right? Say, expend in obedience to God willingly or unwillingly. He's basically just repeating the surah there. Muhammad, say to the hypocrites, right? So these are the people that presumably say they believe or might be in line with Muhammad, but actually are showing a different behavior, hence some hypocrisy. Pay your wealth willingly with good disposition of the soul, or unwillingly, coercively, out of fear of dying. So again, it's kind of just repeating the same thing, sort of coercion of these people that Muhammad claims are hypocrites. Let's go to 954. And what Sahih International, what prevents their expenditures from being accepted from them, but that they will be disbelieved in Allah and His Messenger, and that they come not to prayer except while they are lazy, and that they do not spend except while they are unwilling. Yusuf Ali, the only reasons why their contributions are not accepted are that they reject Allah and His Messenger, that they come to prayer without earnestness, and that they offer contributions unwillingly. So again, like Stops's thing, I haven't actually been doing that, but Stops's like shorthand for this is something like, your contributions won't be accepted if you reject Allah and His Messenger, you don't pray in earnest, and your contributions are unwilling. Okay. So there's a lot of this sort of stuff seemingly going on. So Cloud has jumped out. I think maybe he's lost the connection there. Hopefully he'll be back in a moment. 955.
Well, one of those translations doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Which one?
The Sahih International, that they come not to prayer except while they're lazy. What?
Oh, you mean the split here? Yeah.
It's like so they pray. They pray when they're lazy.
Yeah. So, and here it says, right, and they come to prayer without earnestness. So he's got a bit of a different interpretation there. And they come not to prayer except while they're lazy. So they in other words, yeah. So they're not earnest. They just come and pray, and they go through the motions, but they're not earnest. They don't really care about it. It's just like, going to the toilet or whatever. You just do it because you have to, kind of thing. I guess that's what that means. But you're right. It's again, it could have been worded so much better. But again, this is a translation, right? So some of the Muslims will tell you, no, it's so much clearer in Arabic, and that's why I often read both, both of these, because Sahih International sometimes isn't as clear. Or if I read Yusuf Ali first and then I read Sahih International, sometimes that helps me understand Yusuf Ali. So it's sometimes helpful to have two translations, because you can kind of mix and match them and go, okay, what is being said here? Because if you just have one of them, sometimes Yusuf Ali seems to be better, but I've had the occasions where I've read it and I'm like, no clue. And then I read Sahih International, go, okay, that's kind of what it's alluding to there. But yeah, definitely not.
Like the Yusuf Ali translation seems to explain more. It may not be accurate. It may not. What?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it may or may not be an accurate translation for all I know, but it seems that whoever wrote this is kind of trying to make it clear.
Yeah, I think they could do a better job there. They're trying to make it clear. They could definitely do a better job. Welcome back, Cloud. Obviously, with some technical hitch there.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
You're coming through clear. All good.
Perfect. All right. Sorry, I had to jump on my phone. My computer decided it just wanted to do a system update.
Okay, but that might have been the will of Allah, right? Because everything's ordained and everything is seen ahead of time. So it's just going through the process that Allah already knows about.
I'll accept that.
But you're back now. All right. So 955. We're going to do it the other way around now. So Yusuf Ali, let not their wealth nor their following in sons dazzle thee. In reality, Allah's plan is to punish them with these things in this life, and that their souls may perish in the very denial of Allah. Sahih International. So let not their wealth or their children impress you. Allah only intends to punish them through them in worldly life, and that their souls should depart at death while they are disbelievers.
See that verse tells you a bit about the cultural context.
Go on.
Well, I mean, yeah, it seems that like the culture, from what I can tell, I infer that the culture is probably one where a parent's reputation depends a lot on what their children are like.
Yeah. So don't be concerned with their children or their wealth. Allah will punish them in worldly life, and that their souls should depart while they are believers, while they are disbelievers, and they will remain disbelievers, and their souls may perish in the very denial of Allah. So don't be impressed by their wealth or their family. Allah will punish them in this life, and they will leave this life as disbelievers, essentially.
So you can almost take that, though, as, don't be impressed by the material gain that someone else has. So, like, if someone else has wealth and children and, like, I didn't, well, don't let something like that impress him, because that's not going to be, like, that's not what is fundamentally important, I guess. It can be looked at that way.
Look, it's basically saying that these people may be rich and they may have very well behaved children. They may come off as if they're very good people with very model families, but they're bad and Allah hates them.
Yeah, and Al-Jalalain is kind of saying the similar thing, right? God only desires thereby to chase them in this life, in the life of this world, by way of hardship that they encounter in amassing such wealth and children and calamities, and they suffer thereof. Well, I mean, there's obviously some people that have amassed great wealth and have great families that haven't suffered. And so, I mean, that wouldn't necessarily be true of everybody, but you could, unless you go and cherry pick everything, you go and find a cherry pick something. But I think, it's better to have money than not have money. I've never had a lot, but the people that I speak to that have had a lot, they always say, right, whether you're a good person or a bad person, having more wealth definitely helps in the sense of certainly financial wealth, because some people have been, like being out on the streets and they've had, a big house, and all of them say it's better to have a big house. And so
Yeah. Well, today it's like money doesn't bring happiness, but try and live without it.
yeah, exactly. It's going to bring you a lot more unhappiness.
Yeah.
All right, 956. These are nice short verses. That's great. So Yusuf Ali, they swear by Allah that they are indeed of you, but they are not of you, yet they are afraid, in the brackets, to appear in their true colors. Sahih International. And they swear by Allah that they are from among you, while they are not from among you, but they are people who are afraid.
So
See, honestly, Rob, my take on this, if I'm being frank with you, I think it's probably like a ripoff of the New Testament.
Yes, there's definitely stuff they've taken. A lot of stuff has been taken from the Bible. Yeah.
Like that.
New Testament.
This comes off as very similar to what Jesus would say about the rich people in his society and the Pharisees. That they come off as so righteous, but they're hypocrites. They're evil people.
But that's not surprising, right? Because if Jesus was a prophet, then a lot of what he said would have been taken into that and just transferred over. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, there's a nice short summary of it as well from TDS Dave. Don't envy the successful believer. So maybe we'll ask the panel, the viewers in text, put down your short summary. It's got to be a sentence, no longer than a sentence, of how you would summarize this, and I'll put up the ones as I see them come through. Cool. And so therefore, okay, so let's go on to 57. So, and Yusuf Ali, if they could find a place to flee to, or caves, or a place of concealment, they would turn straight away there too, with an obstinate rush. Sci International. If they could find refuge or some caves or a place to enter, in brackets, and hide, they would turn to it while they run heedlessly.
So?
Yeah, so this is presumably these people who claim to do all of these things. If they could find a place to hide, well, why would they say that? I mean, why would they necessarily do that? Find shelter and find refuge, some caravan underground.
This is basically saying that they're cowards, right?
Yes, yeah, correct. They would hasten and enter it and get away from you with the undeterred speed of an indomitable steed.
So you're going to charge at them and they're going to run away in fear of their life.
So presumably, I mean, the idea here as well possibly is that when they see Muhammad and just know how righteous he is, and that he's God's messenger, even though they had plenty of wealth and great families, they would suddenly see how bad they are as people and want to flee away because here's this righteous man, coming with his army and so forth.
See, I don't understand that, because effectively they're saying, it is now impossible to be wealthy and have a good family and still be humble. Why is that seen as a negative only? Right?
Well, follows from Christianity as well, right?
Well, I don't know, because I can see examples of people today who are incredibly wealthy and they fork out a shit ton of money to just help out the community.
Yeah.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Look, Cloud, this is the old theme of the person who comes off as a righteous, pious pillar of society, and they look like they're stable people with model families, but they're evil. They're secretly evil. They don't. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry, my bad.
They're hypocrites. They don't believe what they preach. They do bad things in secret, and they're also cowardly bitches.
Yeah. This sounds like the only people who bitch about people who have something are the people who have nothing, because they don't want to get off their ass and get it. So I'm going to complain about those who do. Well,
yeah, I mean, this seems to me the overarching idea here is that, this is to put down anybody that doesn't accept or follow Muhammad or go to battle with him or whatever the case is. Even if they're not enemies, that they're certainly, and I'm being very charitable, they're frowned upon. And these verses certainly say that in no uncertain terms.
Yeah.
So here's 958. Yusuf Ali, and among them are men who slander thee in the matter of the distribution of the alms. If they were given part thereof, they are pleased, but if not, behold, they are indignant. Sahih International, and among them are some who criticize you concerning the distribution of charities. If they are given from them, they approve, but if they are not given from them, at once they become angry. So again, this is just the idea of, people are happy if they get given some charity and angry if they aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But presumably this also plays into the idea of them being hypocrites as well. So I think that's also part of this, right? It's the whole idea of these people are hypocrites. They talk about all of these things, but they're very quick to criticize you, O Muhammad, and talk behind your back and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of repeated just in different words over and over, right? So 959, Yusuf Ali, if only they'd been content with what Allah and his messenger gave them, and it said, sufficient unto us is Allah, Allah and his messenger will soon give us of his bounty. To Allah do we turn our hopes. That would have been the right course. Sahih International, if only they had been satisfied with what Allah and his messenger gave them and said, sufficient for us is Allah. Allah will give us his bounty, and so will his messenger. Indeed, we are desirous towards Allah. It would have been better for them. Right, so again, this is just admonishing them for just not taking on faith. The wonderful messengers just doing what they're told, and putting their lives in Allah's or in Muhammad's, having faith in Muhammad, so to speak.
Yeah.
But again, if somebody came to you, right, if you were in the desert and somebody came to you and said, hey, come and follow me and so forth, even if they came with a big army, I'm like, well, why would I do that? Obviously you can threaten me or my family or whatever the case is, but if you're going to claim you're a wonderful person, that's just your words. And, even if all your followers claim you're a wonderful person, I'm just not going to take them on, because you could be a dictator or whatever the case may be. So why would I just take it? But it seems to suggest that because they're not taking this and accepting this almost without thinking, that they're somehow bad or wrong.
Yeah, but if you take a lot of what you were saying, as a whole, it's not really they're just coming up to you and asking you. If you refuse, they're going to belittle you. They're going to mentally abuse the crap out of you until you finally cave in. Right?
Yes.
It's beat you down mentally and emotionally until you give in physically. That's it.
It's definitely a part of it as well, isn't it? It's the psychological sort of pressure on and people who are sort of, in a sense, weak-minded will cave under some pressure. Especially if the verse keeps sort of saying the same thing in slightly different ways, it just starts to pile up. But the big question is, why would we believe any of this, right?
And I don't necessarily think it's...
Why would we believe he's a messenger of God? What evidence has he got? Now he could just slaughter you, because you're asking, honest questions. But, you have to demonstrate it. And just having an army, well, there's been plenty of armies in the history of humankind. That doesn't mean that they were from God, right?
Yeah. But it's like you said, they could slaughter you. And unfortunately, it's not they can, it's they do. And that fear is a very, very powerful tool. And if you can fundamentally have somebody fear for their absolute life to say no, they're going to say yeah. Right? Between the psychological abuse and just the sheer terror of, and not just you being killed, but your entire family. Is it really worth saying no to, or just go with them? At least you're possibly saving, let's say, your child, right? It's a brutal thing.
As this viewer is saying, Muhammad took the majority of the booty anyway. For him was a portion more than everybody else, and then Allah got his portion. Whatever was left was sort of divided up. Quite why Allah needs a portion of his own creation is again a question that I'm sure would have a fascinating answer if I'm being charitable.
He already owns it, so what portion is he getting?
Yeah, I own my front yard, but please do bring me, when you cut the grass, please do bring me a handful of my own grass. as somehow, being grateful for allowing you to mow my lawn.
Yeah, seriously. That's actually a really good analogy. I like that.
All right, last one, because it is a bit of a brain fight trying to read the Quran, I have to be honest. Yusuf Ali, alms are for the poor and the needy and those employed to administer the funds. For those whose hearts have been recently reconciled to the truth. Remember, everything in brackets is not actually said, but it's being inferred by everything else that's being said. So they're adding these words in to try and make the sentence make more sense, but they're not actually in the Quran, or they're not a direct translation. For those in bondage and in debt in the cause of Allah, and for the wayfarer, thus it is ordained by Allah, and Allah is full of knowledge and wisdom. Sahih International. Zakah expenditures are only for the poor and the needy, and for those employed to collect zakah, and for bringing hearts together for Islam, and for freeing captives or slaves, and for those in debt, and for the cause of Allah, and for the stranded traveler, an obligation imposed by Allah. Allah is knowing and wise. So some parts of that are good, right? In the sense of like giving alms to the poor and the needy, and helping certain people. But then you get the parts where, it has to be in the cause of Allah, and like, why do you need to do that? Just get rid of those parts, and give some charity to the poor, those people who are, who can't do it themselves or are unable to. So there's little bits in there. There's fragments. There's glimmers of morality in there, but then it also gets covered over again very quickly by saying it's an obligation by Allah. Well, do I need Allah to know that helping other people less fortunate is a good thing? No, I don't think so. Let's just see if the tafsir say anything. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you don't, but they do. Which really leads me to believe is, if Allah wasn't there, would they then still help? But
exactly my question.
Sorry.
No, you're right. That was exactly my thing, right? If Allah hadn't told them, would they not know to do this? Or would they just, beat the poor up or kill them or something? Well, hopefully, some humans wouldn't. And the humans that might do that, just because Allah told them not to do so, is that going to stop them? Well, no, not necessarily. Unless there's some other implications or consequences that are, brought upon them. That's not going to necessarily stop them doing it. Okay, I think that's pretty much 10 verses of the Quran itself, which in and of itself, as you can see, is quite draining because it's not straightforward. And so it's a case of, trying to work this out. And like I say, if you gave this to somebody on a desert island and said to them, work this out and tell us what this means, I think, people would have huge difficulty in trying to do that.
Rob, who do Muslims think wrote this? Like, they think it was Muhammad?
No, Muhammad didn't write it. He spoke it. It was, so from what I gather, and Rob, please correct me on this, he was approached by the angel Gabriel in a cave, and it was recited to him, and he then recited it to other individuals who wrote it out because he was illiterate. Yet he was also involved in trading, so he knew how to read contracts, or he had a reading eye slave with him.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that this was written by someone who had not read the New Testament.
No, many people. It wasn't just, from what I gather, it's not written by just one individual. He spoke it to you can almost consider it like disciples of Jesus, right? Where he spoke it out to these individuals and they wrote it, and yet it was so unclear and so vague that they needed to go and write the the hadiths, and even that wasn't clear. So then they had to go and get scholars to make sense of it, because a message from God cannot be clear enough. You need to have 3 different links to make heads or tails of it. And even then.
Yeah, we had a conversation, I think last week, with a Muslim that came on the Discord server, and I was chatting to him about this. And Stops brought up the idea about the age of marriage, right, which isn't in the Quran. And so if you go to the tafsirs, which are some of the interpretations by some of the scholars, they give various ages there. But nowhere does it say that in the Quran. And the question was put to this particular Muslim: Is this the perfect, most clear way of describing this? And he goes, yeah, it is. And this went back and forth for a while, and then I thought to myself, okay, one of the ways to elucidate this is to do a counterexample. So I brought up the verse about talking about eating not flesh, swine, right? It says it clearly: do not eat swine unless you're basically about to die, unless you need it. And I said to him, what's more perfect, right? The fact that it says don't eat swine, or if it had said don't eat meat. And he said don't eat swine. I'm like, okay. So what you are saying is, in fact, when it's more specific, it's better or clearer or whatever the case is. So why is that not the case with marriage? Because it says in the Quran that there's an age of marriage, but it doesn't give an age. Now, had it done exactly what the swine did, which is, hey, at the age of marriage, which is X years old, we would then be more clear on what the age of marriage is, because it's not said anywhere in the Quran. So they have to appeal to, hadith or the surah, the sunnah, and obviously Muhammad's example, which by today's standards, I don't think anybody wants to appeal to, except if you're Ali Dawa or one of these sort of people. Nobody else is going to marry a 6-year-old. But if it had made it clear in the Quran, then, the problem is, had it made it clear in the Quran, then of course it would have shown that Muhammad was wrong. So at this stage, you don't have this clear. And when I pointed this out, it's just very easy to show it in that way.
Well, it's because Allah spoke to Muhammad and said, just don't put that number down, because down the road, this is going to be seen as taboo.
And of course, remember, this book is supposedly has been with us since the beginning of time, or, well, he's existed eternally, but it's been along with Allah. Now, whatever that's supposed to mean, right, is that in his mind, whatever that might mean, or what is a mind without a brain? I don't know, but presumably something floating out there, unembodied mind, which is always Jarl's critique, right, about, minds are, require brains, etc. So why would we believe some sort of mind that isn't attached to a brain, unless there is
honestly, Rob, like, it was probably written by someone who didn't care too much about readers thousands of years later reading this stuff, or it was written by someone who probably wasn't aware that other cultures have different marriage ages.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was never meant to for anybody else. And to the degree, as Cloud was saying, right, Muhammad supposedly got these revelations from Gabriel at a certain point, and then sometimes it wasn't necessarily from Gabriel.
Like, what was the age of marriage in that culture? Because probably if you lived around the time when this was written, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, everyone knows the age of marriage,
Probably less than 10, right, at that time. So it wasn't unusual to marry children. And they probably even knew that they were children. It wasn't like they had the idea that they were adults. But it just wasn't seen as a problem. Today it's seen as a problem. And so Muslims are in a bit of a rock and a hard place. Trying to claim that they were adults just as absurd, but then also trying to accept that it's okay for them to do it as children, looking back, is equally absurd. I've always said it, right? The way they could get out of this is just to say that Muhammad made things slightly better than what they were. I mean, that's a very low bar, right? Because it was pretty barbaric at that time anyway. So if he made it slightly better, that's fine. But if you're going to claim that he was a moral example either at that time or any time after that for all time, that's where you just get buried. And the apologetics that they have to try and argue this is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, like what something I don't understand, and I've spoken to some Muslims on this, and they're adamant that the teachings of the Quran are supposed to supersede time. And I guess what they mean by that is that anything that's okay in the Quran is okay throughout time, because Allah proclaimed it to be so. And yet when you start bringing up many of these passages to them, it's, no, we can't do that right now. Well, then what is it? Like, your book is only acceptable during a specific time period only? Why can't you do that now? Why aren't you okay with this now?
Yeah, they can't go down that route, Cloud, as you point out, right? They have to claim that the book is for all time, for all people. But then again, if you ask them, do they agree with some of these ideas? Some of them will say no. But then you've got to ask them, okay, so are you claiming that you have some sort of moral, objective moral views on this point? Because it seems like it's changing. So what do you mean by a moral view? Simply that a celestial dictator gave it to you, but they can change whenever it suits you? Because nowhere in the Quran or the Hadiths or anywhere else does it say at this time, I now outlaw or abolish child marriage or slavery or whatever it is. So it's humans that have changed over time, and those Muslims that have grown up in those countries where we've changed that sort of stuff now have to go, well, what do I do about this? What was a Muslim living in the West?
Well, Rob,
be a dichotomy that I don't know how you can escape.
it was objectively right in the Arabian Peninsula at the time, but
just not anymore.
Yeah, so then you've got to ask, Joel, okay, so where is it that it's shown that it was only for X amount of time? If there was something like this, and I say unto you now X, Y, and Z after Muhammad's death, well, obviously then somebody else would have to be speaking. But if it were the case that Allah spoke or communicated with him before he died, and suddenly all of these things were the case because he knew he was on his deathbed, we'd have to question why that was kind of convenient anyway at the end of his life. But at least then we'd have a point where it says, okay, all of this is stopped now. You could still ask the question, why did it allow it to happen? And Muslims come up with all kinds of things. One of the most hilarious ones that I hear is that, hang on a moment, it would have created great hardship to outlaw slavery the moment, Muhammad suddenly spoke to Allah, even though, that's 200,000 years after humans have kind of become Homo sapien type things. But at this particular time, he comes to intervene. And but no, this would have created great hardship in the economy. But hang on a moment, isn't all of life a test? And if all of life is a test, and you're going to follow the moral way, and Muhammad has got God Almighty on his side,
agreed by Allah.
Yeah, but look, all of life is a test to an omniscient being.
Yeah, but if all of life's a test, then you would expect Allah to lay down the law and be very clear on what the morals are. And when it happens to give hardship to his people, well, that's a test that they have to go through to show that they are in fact moral people.
Yeah, but who is Allah testing for what? This is a test by Allah.
The believers.
An omniscient being for what?
Well, it's for the believers and the fake believers too.
Well, no, it doesn't matter what it is, because we perform tests to achieve or to understand a certain thing. We have to reach a conclusion of understanding. We test things to know things. We're talking about an omniscient being testing for what? What doesn't he know?
Look, he's a look. I'll tell you like it is, Cloud. Like these religions. They talk about a God who's a narcissist, to put it bluntly, and they want to test your loyalty to his what he wants you to do, whatever that is.
I understand the human aspect of it, right? We are testing each other, but it makes no sense for an omniscient being to be performing any sort of tests. And they don't ever have an answer to it when you bring that up to them. They're just, oh no, Allah knows all. Then if he knows all, why is he testing? What is the purpose of the test?
And he knows exactly what's going to happen, then there isn't really a test. And to the extent that there is a test, the only test that's happening is testing you on what you don't yet know. But that's like the teacher kind of having the knowledge that you are going to fail the test. And this is the analogy that the Muslims want to give. The problem with that analogy is they'd have to agree that the teacher's omniscient for the analogy to work. If they just say, hey, well, the teacher knows you're going to write the test, there's no point in writing the test. Clearly there's no point even going into the classroom. You might as well not go into the classroom. The end result is exactly the same as whether you go into the classroom and sit down and attempt to write something on paper or look at the ceiling or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, what they fail to do is they don't really understand it. The way they give I don't actually think they know what an analogy is or how to properly use it.
Oh, I agree with that.
I don't want to say
time
all of them,
it's disanalogous.
Yeah, it's like every time I try and listen to one of them make an analogy, it's just like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Sorry, I'm swearing. I don't know what you're talking about. You're saying something, but it is so unrelated to what it is we were talking about. I don't think you know what you're doing. And it drives me nuts.
Yeah, I hate analogies. I always say to Muslims, please don't give me an analogy. It's because you'd give an analogy if I didn't understand something. Most often I kind of understand whether I agree with you or not is the difference different thing.
Yeah.
But I most often understand. So to give me an analogy, it's almost like, in a sense, you're insulting my intelligence. And when you do give me an analogy, it's 99 times out of 100, it's disanalogous. So and now I have to go back and backtrack and tell you why your analogy is useless. Don't give me an analogy, right? The analogy, a great example of this was Darren Hamza with his analogy about the sniper with the contingency argument. And it's just so disanalogous, as we've discussed prior. And if you haven't seen it, go look on the Speakers Corner UK channel, and we discussed that in depth, where we were critiquing that particular live stream. So, message to Muslims: please don't give us analogies unless we are absolutely clueless and we ask for one, but it's going to be almost never, right? So just don't give us analogies. It's a waste of your time and ours, and now we have to go and correct you on why it's disanalogous.
Yeah, and if you're going to give an analogy, please, for the love of Allah, go learn what an analogy is and how to formulate one properly, because you don't.
Yeah, it's just not worth it. All right, let's go on and get on to the more interesting one, shall we say. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to bring this up full screen here. And so this was, and Cloud is here with us this evening, so great for Cloud showing up, and so is Jarl. And we're going to go through this now. So this is when Cloud joined one of the Answering Atheists live stream on, let's just have a look here. This was on Hamza's Den on the 6th of November, 2020. And so we've skipped forward to at the part where Cloud has just joined the server, just joined the stream. What I'll do is I'm going to start playing it. Hopefully you guys can hear it. Just shout if you can't hear it. I have shared the audio, so shout if you can't hear it. At any moment, just say stop, and I'll stop, and then any of you guys can level some critique. I'll stop it myself when I think something needs to be said, and that's the way we'll go. We'll see how far we get. We've got more than an hour until the show normally finishes, but if we go on a bit, that's fine. I can't remember how long Cloud is on for here.
Oh God,
we'll certainly see how we get on. So just remember, guys, just shout out loud, the two of you. If you're listening to this in the chat, type us a message, and between the three of us, I'll certainly keep an eye on the chat here, and if you've got anything interesting, we'll add that to the stream as well. So with that said, let us get going. Let me know, guys, that you can hear this.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to carry on with Cloud?
No, man. You're the expert here, man. I'm just.
No, I'm not.
No. We'll leave it for another time then. No problem.
Okay, it sounded like, hopefully you guys can hear that. It sounded like Darren wasn't, or Hamza wasn't sort of as willing to go one-on-one with you, because I think Subboor said just before this that it was late in the office and he had to go home. So Darren sounded like, so
they both stick around until I mention Darwin's prediction, and then he's like, nope, throws his hands up and just buggers off. And I'm like, oh. Sad.
All right, so let's see now, because I think so. Obviously, Subboor does stay on for a while here, but it seemed like Darren didn't want to go one-on-one with you. But that's the other thing I noticed with these live streams, right? It's heavily packed with 3 or 4 Muslims, and they only allow one person on, and then they can, if they need to, dogpile the person. And if somebody doesn't have an answer, then somebody else can jump in and take over. That gives it breathing room for the other guy. So you can see how this modus operandi is. 1-on-1 or 2-on-2, they won't do, right? They've got to load it on their side. So that they can appear to have, at least somebody can come up with something that sounds like an answer for their audience.
We can do it again.
The only thing is I'm at the office and need to head off home now.
You can't do like 15 more minutes?
We can schedule this another time.
We could
I literally have chicken done. I'm like, yeah.
You've been waiting a long time, Cloud. No problem. Let's do 15 minutes.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So, I'm part of a Discord group. They sent me a link to you guys. And what it was the scientific method and faith, or something along those lines. I'm roughly paraphrasing. Correct me if I have that incorrect. Where do you believe there's faith in evidence? These are two separate things, completely different concepts. If I have evidence for something, I don't require faith. Okay. I have evidence for it.
Yeah. So our live stream was basically about the faith of scientism and the false narrative that's given out by the proponents of scientism and their misuse of science. So we don't have a problem with science per se. We have a problem with those who say that science is the only route of knowledge. science gives you absolute certainty, and science has disproven God, or science has basically shown that it's improbable that there is no God.
Okay, so he put a number of different claims there. I mean, you guys, please jump in and tell me, have you met any atheists or any scientists that say that science absolutely disprove? Well, first that it's absolute, or that absolute.
It is, yeah. I corrected him there. I'm pretty sure I corrected. I'm like, no, we don't make claims to absolute certainty. We make varying degrees of certainty. Like, you know, I'm pretty damn certain if I drop my, mug, it's going to fall and hit the ground.
So most of them were straw men, right? Like he said that atheists. He said that there are these people who claim that science grants absolute knowledge. That there's atheists who think that science has disprove God. But even though I do take that position personally, like most atheists do not take that position, but he is right in criticizing this idea that science is the only way of knowledge, and there's plenty of atheists who believe that.
And I granted him. I'm pretty sure I granted him that too. I'm like, sure, but I think there are other means that we can use to obtain knowledge. Give me another more reliable, practice to doing so, and I'll take it on.
You'll hear that they won't do that, right? They're not going to say there's a more reliable. They just want to say that there's something else. And I think most of us would grant that. I'm actually, and Jarl, you've spoken to a lot more people probably in other spheres, but I've not heard of somebody, and maybe there is, maybe somebody like Aaron Ra, I don't know, we'd have to ask him. He's maybe one of the closest, but I'm not sure how many people think that science is the only route to knowledge, especially if they have some understanding of it.
Please, I mean, no. I mean, there are plenty of atheists like that. If I'm being honest, even over platforms like Discord or even in person, if I walk up to most atheists and I say like, okay, do you think science is the only way we can know stuff? They'll be like, well, yeah. Can you please demonstrate to me another method of obtaining knowledge that isn't science? Can you test that? So yeah, absolutely, he's right. It's a common position among atheists, which is flawed.
Okay, maybe I just haven't spoken to those atheists that you have then. And again, I'm listening, I suppose, not to as many of those sort of people, but more the philosophers and sort of more knowledgeable people. So again, maybe I've just got it. My segment is sort of geared towards that. So you're right, there could well be these other people.
Talk to Travis Pangburn. I'll DM the link to the server later on. But yeah, you can meet some.
Okay. All right, fair enough. The other thing that he said, which I think is sort of problematic, is that he says, well, they don't have any problem with science. Now, the thing, of course, is that as soon as science contradicts the Quran, well, then they have a big problem. Then science is the thing that isn't a truth with a capital T. And now we get into the philosophy of science and the problem of induction. And now all the philosophical, guns come out when there's some claim about what we understand about the world today that contradicts the Quran. But as long as that isn't happening, then these guys want to ride the crest of the wave. And I think this is something else where I see them being disingenuous and not just a nice science, right? Just say whatever the Quran is true, and I don't care what science says. Then you be consistent, it seems to me.
I don't think it's that they don't care what science says. It's they're going to find a way, and it's not just them. Right. It's almost anyone who goes into any sort of theology where they're always going to try and like pimp science, right? Like turn it around to make it fit what they believe, even if what they're doing just turns out it doesn't make any more sense. I don't know why they do it, but they do it.
But what happens when it flatly contradicts their ideas? Then suddenly the scientific method itself comes into question. But at other times that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Right. Let's carry on.
So we're arguing against scientism. Science in of itself, we don't have a problem with people utilizing science as long as they understand this is a way of.
Yes, they do. That is a flat out lie, because the way we use science is generally going to be done through the scientific method, which they criticize wholeheartedly every time. So yeah, that's just verbal diarrhea.
Please could I put the link to this video in the chat so it could be properly secured? Yeah, sure. Let me give you the link here. Here you go, guys. If you guys want to watch this in its entirety. We're only going to watch the part with Cloud, and we'll critique that part. So there you go. It's in the chat there. You can have a look at that. I'll put it in, hopefully, if I remember, into the description after this video is done.
I'm the only important part to listen to.
Require knowledge. However, this is not something that can be used to justify the rather faulty position in epistemology of that science is the be-all and end-all.
Oh, okay, then we absolutely agree from the beginning then.
Brilliant.
I want to ask you, what did you think about the Richard Dawkins clip that we played, where he tried to solve the problem of induction using induction? Just want to know.
Yeah, so my whole thing on that is, when you say, how do you know it's, what was the question again that they had asked? It was brief. To Dawkins.
Was the old question, which is, how do you justify the scientific method without using science? As in the old problem that David Hume tried to solve, which is if the observations that we have in the future, they challenge our previous theory, how can we be sure that our theories are true? And of course, part is induction to prove induction.
Yeah, no, because of the reliability and predictability. So, for instance, we'll use his plane analogy he made. Planes fly because, a lot of different variables go into designing a plane, right? We know the aerodynamics and the different stages that go into it. We test, we repeat, and we demonstrate, right? So it's demonstrable, repeatable, verifiable. It's whenever it ceases to meet those criteria is whenever we make the shift, where we either have to adjust or completely dismiss because it no longer works.
Yeah, so I think what he's asking here, and you're quite correct on that point, Cloud, what he's asking is that how do you justify it? And what you said, and I know you weren't saying that was a justification, but if somebody, and I can't remember what the clip was with Dawkins, but that would then be circular, right? Hey, how do you justify that science works? Because we tested and therefore it works, right? That's just going around in a circle.
It's enough of a justification in and of itself. We do it. It produces consistent, reliable results. We're able to predict, make accurate predictions with it. It's self-justifying. What's the problem?
Yeah, well, for them that and possibly, and Yal's not here, but the objection that would be levied is, okay, well, that's a circular argument because you're saying that, hey, it's true because it proves itself to be true.
What's the problem?
And that's because they're asking for a justification that's not circular, right? That's probably the objection that he's probably not going to, I can't remember what he says, but that might be one of the things that he might bring up and say, okay, how do you justify something without invoking circularity? Because he could say, oh, well, I think it's true because, the world around us is true because Allah made it that way. How do you know? Because Allah said that it is the case. And so he said, well, okay, I can do the same justification. You could, of course, ask him, as you point out, okay, well, how do you justify that? And that's what the whole apologetic is about. And we know how weak it is. But I'm guessing when they say justification, they're looking for a non-circular argument for that. And so
I don't remember what you did.
Go on.
I was going to say, I don't remember if they pressed on beyond that or if they pretty much had accepted the fact that we can predict, test, repeat, demonstrate. And I should have said, and this is where I should have said falsifiability. But I neglected to say that. And
yeah, that's definitely helpful as well. I think the big thing for me would be say, okay, I can't justify science using science, or I can't justify science in any epistemic certain way using the method. That would be circular. So what I'm going to do is exactly what you do, and I'm not claiming that it reaches truth with a capital T, but it has reliability built into it. Can you demonstrate another method that does equally well or better?
Well, here's where people who don't know science try and pull that kind of crap out of their ass, because science never makes proclamations to truth, right? It's never done. This is true. This is the best explanation that we can currently provide with the current available data. It's subject to change. We'll see what comes down the pipeline. And they're trying to say, no, it has to be an ultimate truth. And this is where I think they're mentally, they've trapped themselves mentally, right? It has to be an ultimate truth. Otherwise, it just can't be true. Well, no, why does it have to be, right? Why is there must in there? I think they're too uncomfortable with the uncertainties.
Well, they're looking for certainty, right? As you say, they're definitely looking for certainty. If they don't have it, then it could be wrong. And they want to sort of infer that their book has the certainty built in, but as we look through and dig deep beneath the surface, we find that that can't be the case either, right? It came to fallible human beings, and even its method of transmissibility is person to person, not even being written down in the beginning. So how reliable is that? And then they want to sort of claim how reliable it is because they can say it over and correct each other and so forth. I'm not convinced of that at all. And when we put that to the test in any sphere, we find how bad human reliability is. So I'm not suddenly going to accept it because it's in Arabic.
Yeah. and if you know Arabic, that's nice. Do you know classical Arabic?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, he wasn't making he wasn't making that particular point. It was more to do with the pragmatic instrumental value of science.
Sure, that's his point. If you want to argue him, go argue him. That's how I am explaining my position on that. That's what you wanted to know.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get to is that we don't have an issue with the idea that, okay, if you base say aerodynamics on credible scientific groundings, then it's going to be a successful, fruitful field.
Not always. I mean, planes crash. Rockets.
They do, but that's because of unknowns. But
yes.
What we're referring to here is the problem of induction, meaning future observations cannot be relied upon to confirm with our previous conclusions, right?
How do you make a future observation now?
Exactly.
Okay, so you don't. So what you do is a really good example of that's actually called.
Okay, so I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. So clarify for me. Maybe it was the word observation, right? So for example, with general relativity. Sorry, say again.
You stopped it right when I corrected them. I was like,
"Oh, okay.
Dang
let me do that. Let me just carry on for a moment then."
So a very good example of that is you take current data, right? So all of these tests that you do, and you make a prediction. Now, then you test if that prediction. Trying to think of the word here. I'm losing my tongue. Is valid? Then, so an example of that would be. Take Darwin, right? He came up with the prediction of.
Did you know about Subboor before you came on this stream?
Vaguely, I knew him barely by name. I was just part of another server who, I forget the name. And I would sit there and just pin them, and they have no ability to respond. And they're like, "Go debate these guys. These guys will put you in your place." And then I came on. And I'm talking to these guys, and it's like, well, how can you tell about things in the future? It's called a prediction, right?
Yeah. That's exactly. But now you bring up evolution, and of course, this is the thing that he likes to talk about, and he's got his little gotchas and so forth. At least that he thinks are gotchas. So it's only because I know him, I'd rather bring up general relativity. But let's see what happens here. I don't actually remember your stream, so we'll see it live. You will remember, but let's see what happens because you're bringing up evolution now. So let's see how he responds. Firstly, let's finish what you're saying and see how he responds to this.
Yeah, just modification and variance within a species. He made a prediction. Line of the look here, you'll find this particular fossil. Well, they looked, they dug, they found it. Prediction confirmed.
Actually, in the Origin of Species, his prediction was that you'll have gradualism, and that's come out to be.
No, actually, it's not. And the actual result of that was what the hell was that fossil they found? I had it earlier.
Hey, Rob, hang on a second.
Go on.
What he just did was called a straw man, because I specifically gave the example of the prediction where Darwin came up with common descent, where he predicted the discovery, and the fossil I couldn't remember, I remembered afterwards, Archaeopteryx. So I went specifically to that prediction, and he decided we're going to ignore that, and we're going to go down this other road that I never brought up. So right now he's being dishonest and he's dodging.
Yeah, he's bringing up a different point here, or he's understanding Darwin to mean, or one of two things. Either he's taking a different prediction of Darwin that was proven wrong, or he's thinking that what you are talking about is gradualism and viewing that as being wrong. And so whatever. Go on.
Yes and no. You'll see as this continues, it's yes and no. He's not addressing the prediction that I brought up, which is where Darwin was correct with common descent. And this whole thing was just as an example to say, you know, predictions exist. So you can't see future evidence. You make predictions, you test your, then you can see if the predictions are valid.
Correct.
It's not called future observations.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's predictions. You're quite right. And something like, you know, for me, I often bring up general relativity and the prediction of the perihelion of Mercury going around the sun, and or that you could see the stars behind the sun. This would only be possible if light bends around massive objects, and that's because, you know, gravity has an effect on light. And that's much harder to go down. But because he's read a little bit into evolution, anybody that brings up this topic, he'll just go into that topic now, and that's something to be aware of. And if you want to debate evolution, then you can with him. But if, as you say, you wanted to make the point and you know who this guy is, to avoid him going down these rabbit trails,
I
on the evolution thing.
I thought of it later. I'm like, I should have just brought up or the discovery of, what the hell was it, Neptune, after seeing the wobble in Mercury. I should have brought that up.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? Yeah.
It'll come back to me after. But yeah,
he claimed if gradualism turns out to be false, his theory will break down.
No, because his prediction was valid.
His prediction was falsified.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I dare.
Oh, so I guess the question I would have at this stage, and you know, again, maybe you'll do it, is like, which prediction? The prediction of gradualism? Explain that to me, right? Because I'm not sure if he's tracking you or what's happening here, but it's like, which prediction is he claiming has been falsified? It can't be. It can't be natural. It can't be natural selection, could it?
No, he does. He does continue. You'll actually hear this. Okay. But the problem that he was facing at the like right now is he's not even coming close to addressing the prediction I've brought up. He's going down something completely different, and then you're going to see how he wraps it around and say natural selection's been falsified. I'm like, what? Cool. Yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah, let's go down this again.
Dare you to find anything that actually supports that claim? Because I can actually show the evidence.
Oh, okay. I will. So in the Origin of Species, he says that if evolution basically doesn't work from a gradualistic perspective in terms of the fossil record, then his theory will break down. Okay. Now, in the structure of evolutionary theory, Stephen Jay Gould.
Sorry, you want to say? Oh, was that you on the recording? I'm not sure if it's you speaking to me now or you on the recording.
Many years ago,
just bobbing around.
Okay.
Actually, fossil record, and it's the trade secret of paleontology that gradualism isn't the paradigm that we see. Hence, why they had to come up with punctuated equilibrium. So Darwin, in chapter 6 of his book, he actually laid out the Cambrian explosion as a problem, and he realized it's a problem, and he thought future findings will actually resolve it. However, what ended up happening was not only was it not resolved, it actually got far worse. Now, in 2016, and I think this is very important to highlight, and this isn't...
Can you see how he's gone off on this long rabbit trail, right? And if you know this guy, this is appealing to his gullible audience, right? This has got nothing to do with scientism per se, right? The only thing here that you could vaguely make reference to is that is the point which I think you talked about anyway, which is that nobody's claiming that science is absolute, but they are reliable predictions that move us in a certain direction. But now he wants to lecture on this, right? Because he's read a little bit here. And this sort of gives him authority in the gullible viewer's eyes, right? This isn't for you. This isn't to convince you of anything, because as you say, the question that you asked isn't being answered. But as long as you understand the psychology that's going on, and I'm sure you do, but I want to make it useful to the viewers, this is now like a little bit of a lecture to the audience, so they go, wow, this guy's amazing. And if you look at the chat, right, I'll bet you science works and your God doesn't. Okay, that's obviously... not somebody else. But if we were to watch the chat here, we will hear them chatting about how wonderful it is. Brother Subboor is just amazing, right? So this is the reason why he's going down this route. That's why I wouldn't talk about evolution, because it doesn't give him the ability to try and lecture, go off on a tangent, and not for you or I, but to appeal to his gullible audience.
Yeah. But the thing, because if you anyone who listens to this, if you back it up like by a minute or so, you actually hear me specifically tell him Show me the evidence to back up your claim because I can, right? And again, the tangent he's going down, he hasn't even addressed common descent. He's going down something that I haven't even brought up. And Dawkins did not claim to have solved the problem of induction. Well, we know that, but he's not very smart, right? And the problem with the Cambrian explosion, there's no problem there. And punctuated equilibrium is supposed to have disproved Darwin. No, because Darwin's big, name to fame was common descent, that we are inherently related to our past. Hell, look at cladistics. And I think I bring that up with him, and he's just like,
yeah.
Just these are things you can. I don't know your name. Your name says Cloud, but you can go and read this in 2016 at the Royal Society in London. And remember the Royal Society in 1858 when Darwin presented it before the next year when he went public with it, his theory. And in 2016, they actually had a conference and it was about whether Darwin was right. And there were some Darwinists who tried to argue he's right. There's others who argued he's not right. Yeah, exactly. Darwinian evolution, in terms of its predictions, in terms of its assumptions,
it's a prediction. And you have to understand, when I say, go dig here and you will find X, and you go dig there and you find X, my prediction was go dig there, you'll uncover something. You go do it, prediction validated. It has been confirmed. And that's exactly what happened during his time period.
But the other thing is, okay, so he might have got something wrong, but the main prediction is what he got correct, right? So, but he's just pointing out, if we were to accept certain part of it, that he might have got something wrong. Well, so what, right? He didn't know everything at the time.
Dude, Einstein said black holes could not occur naturally. So do we throw out everything else, like special relativity? No. You're not going to be right about everything, but we accept where you are right, and we move along with that. We just say the stuff you're wrong, try again. Right? You're right here, let's take it. And they don't understand.
Exactly. But the whole thing here is to try and put doubt into the mind of his viewers about the scientific method when it suits. When it doesn't, or when it confirms or appears to confirm the Quran, then you never hear them talk about this. You'll never hear them say X, Y, and Z. Look how it confirms the Quran. But hang on a moment, guys. Let me just tell you about the scientific method and the problem of induction. You never hear that. It's only when there's something that they don't like or doesn't play into the narrative, then suddenly the whole underpinning of science needs to be questioned, or you have to accept that it's not getting you to absolute certainty. Not that anybody I'm aware of says that anyway. Certainly not anybody knowledgeable. Yeah. So this is just like a game really here.
Oh, pretty much, yeah. And that's why I brought him back to the point I made where I'm like, no. If I make a prediction and I say go dig there, and I got to reel them back in to just stay on topic, because you're somewhere in Pittsburgh and I'm talking about New York. We're obviously not talking about the same thing. I'm going to bring you back on topic here because obviously you need to be handheld here. So that's fine.
Yeah, and to use your analogy going further, if you said go and dig there with a fork and the fork didn't work so well, but then you went and used a spade and you dug there and you found it, okay, so you made a mistake about using a fork to dig, but you used a spade, so you changed that part of it, but does that undermine the entire thing? Obviously not. So one small thing doesn't mean you undermine everything else.
According to them, it does, but only here, because they won't apply that same type. It's intellectually inconsistent, because they will not apply that very same line of reasoning to everything else. Only here, this one special thing. Well, it doesn't work like that, boys.
Really been uncovered since. So I'm sorry.
What I would do is I would simply just Google these things.
I've studied evolution. I've studied Darwin. So
wait one second. So you studied Darwin and you studied evolution. Yeah. Have you heard of punctuated equilibrium?
How do I know punctuated equilibrium?
Have you heard of punctuated equilibrium?
Vaguely.
Okay. You haven't studied evolution or Darwinism. I'm sorry. If you're saying you've studied this stuff and you vaguely heard of punctuated equilibrium, I can't take seriously the claim you studied evolution.
Okay, but then.
Yeah, and so this is a case of if you don't know one particular fact that I've spoken about or know about, then you don't understand the entire topic.
That's okay, because I'm going to throw everything right back at him.
again, I'm also able to produce the information and the data that actually shows when Darwin made his prediction, it was valid within his time period. So how do you argue that? Right? So are you saying evolution is not a thing?
No. I'm
okay.
Look, Cloud.
That's another stream. That's another stream. Don't worry.
Cloud.
You can also see Darren doesn't really know any of this, right? He's listening in the background here. He's got his man there. Whatever Subboor says, Darren will accept, right? He won't question because he doesn't know anything about this topic anyway. But the smile there is if they've got some knockdown argument or something that goes against atheists or atheism. It's fascinating to watch, right? Somebody like that who's utterly clueless but thinks that they've got a good position, but based on not knowing anything about the topic.
I take that as he's just having fun listening to the conversation, because when Subboor leaves, it's just me and him.
Yeah, you'll find I haven't watched that, or I don't remember it, but I'm going to assume that he's not going to be as, because normally he's quite condescending. It's like, we've refuted, we've debunked, we've schooled, rinsed. These are the sort of words that he often uses, because I know this guy for years. This is the sort of words that he uses, and he often uses it when he has other panelists on with him. But if he's on with somebody else, then it may or may not. I don't remember whether it happens with you, whether he's quite so condescending on his own.
No, he actually shuts right up, and he flat out on his thing says, we don't have any evidence for this particular thing.
Okay, cool.
Oh, you can join us when we do the stream again, but I'm sorry, if I'm asking you about punctuated equilibrium and you don't know about it, I'm not going to take you seriously.
You're literally dodging my point. Stop dodging. If somebody makes a prediction, and that prediction is
validated,
thank you, validated.
Yep.
Then I'm sorry, it's correct. Right?
No,
really, because it's now supported by the evidence, and that's the key.
I'm sorry, it doesn't work as simple as that.
I just want to bring this up because my friend here, Detective Inspector Monkfish, has actually read quite a bit on this as well. And he says here, both Gould and Eldridge, who came up with punctuated denier that violates Gradulin in the relevant sense, both of them are self-described true Darwinists. So, and of course, when Detective Inspector Monkfish went on this stream at one point, and basically told Subboor he had no clue what he was saying about basically anything, he got very defensive. That is, Subboor got defensive. And tried, and he invoked the tactic, right? And again, just to go back, the tactic about this, right? Notice what happened. You made a claim. He then asked you a question to see how much you know. And if you had told him all about punctuated equilibrium, he would likely have would have asked you about something else, trying to probe for a weakness to make it look like he can undermine your claim, right? And that then relieves him of having to deal with a question. So this is another way that these guys will do it, right? Just go off on a tangent to try and undermine your credibility, and then say, in the minds of the audience, right? Oh, well, this guy, whatever he says now, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's part of the tactic that's going on here.
Oh, of course, yeah. That's why I flat out told him, like, here's the prediction, here's where it's validated. I think it was like 12 years after he made the prediction, he was still alive. And since then, they found many more different transitional fossils. So I have the evidence to back my shit up. You have your ego. And then I throw exactly what he did to me back at him. And then he just gets all antsy and leaves. I was sad.
Because
it absolutely does. Because that's how science works, right?
But
that's just the basics.
Actually, no, it doesn't. Because if science did work like that, philosophers of science would be out of a job.
Okay, so then how do you validate something? By what method? How do you validate a claim?
One second. A theory makes multiple predictions. If predictions are verified, then that part of the theory we can accept. But if predictions are falsified, then that part of the theory we have to discard. Additionally, if a prediction is confirmed, it doesn't just mean one theory is correct. We have the problem of underdetermination, in which case multiple theories are.
Sorry, I went too far there.
No, that's fine. That's good there. So for some reason, and I don't know why he seems to think this, he's unaware that there have been thousands of transitional species fossils found. Just the one, only the one. And therefore, we can't use it to. I agree. If it was really only the one, well, it could potentially. One piece of data isn't really that right. You can't really hammer that nail down. You need a body of data that accounts to evidence. And we have thousands upon thousands of transitional species, and yet he's only sticking. No, we only have the one. So if we only have that one, well, we don't. We have more than that. And now you're just being dishonest, not only to me, but to your audience. Because then he can't argue that. He can't argue the point that, oh, no, we have more than one of them, whatever.
Yeah.
Work it as simple as that, because
it absolutely does. Because that's how science works, right?
But
that's just the basic.
Actually, no, it doesn't. Because if science did work like that, philosophers of science would be out of a job.
Okay, so then how do you validate something? By what method? How do you validate a claim?
One second. A theory makes multiple predictions. If predictions are verified, then that part of the theory we can accept. But predictions are falsified, then that part of the theory we have to discard. Additionally, if a prediction is confirmed, it doesn't just mean one theory is correct. We have the problem of underdetermination, in which case multiple theories are empirically equivalent because they make the same predictions. So I'm sorry.
No, because it doesn't matter what theory says.
I didn't interrupt you. Give me a second. The problem of underdetermination shows you can't simply go by the confirmation of a prediction to theory A is correct, because theory B, C, D, and E can make empirically equivalent predictions, which are also verified.
However, whenever it comes to evolution, because evolution is summarily defined as descent with inherent genetic modification. Do you agree?
No.
Okay,
no.
Then
pause right there. He doesn't even know what evolution is summarily defined as descent with inherent genetic modification. Just means that there's a mutation, a change in the allele frequencies that's passed down from parent to daughter, son, lineage, and so on and so forth. And he just right there, nope, I don't agree with that. Then he doesn't know what evolution is.
So let's hear what he claims it is, right? Because that's your one. So what is presumably, I don't know if you ask him now or whether he says what he does, because this is the one thing, and I don't know, and hopefully you will, but what he gets away with a lot is not having to answer questions or to justify or to give reasons why he believes X. And so he'll make a claim, and then often what happens is somebody will say, no, that's wrong. And what I'm saying to people is ask him to justify the claim, right? Why is it that you believe X, or what's your evidence for X? And if he's now saying, well, he doesn't accept what you define as evolution, the question is, okay, what is your definition, and why do you believe that's true?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I did that, or because I'd asked him earlier a couple times, show me evidence for what it is you're saying. And he refused to do so. He just went down tangents. So I'm not sure if I actually asked him or if I just became frustrated at that point and just dismissed his opinion about whatever altogether.
Okay, let's see what he says here.
Know what evolution is.
No.
Because at the very basis, at the very fundamental foundation of evolution, that is what it is. Evolution, definition is
Cloud. This particular topic is going to be gone into in detail on a different stream.
But listen.
But this is important because you've already rejected evolution.
Cloud, what you're doing is basically this. You're using a very vague definition.
No.
One second. You just mentioned Darwin, correct?
Yes.
So what definition did you mention natural selection when that was his main idea?
Did I say natural selection?
You didn't, but you should have.
Okay, so then no.
I don't need to.
Okay, hang on. Natural selection.
Wait.
No. Natural selection is one selection method in evolution. Sorry? There are many different ones. Okay. Natural selection is only one selection mechanism in evolution. You have different variants, right? You have sexual selection, you have natural selection. There are different selection processes involved. Evolution, definitely, right, is descent with inherent genetic modification. This happens.
And what's the mechanism? What's the mechanism?
Okay, but do you see that's now that's like what's the term? It's like shifting the goalposts, because he asked you for the definition, and now he's asking for the mechanism. The definition, the mechanism are two different things, right?
And that's why I stopped him right there. And I had to that doesn't matter, because so natural selection, and I did say sexual selection, which was bad on my part. That was incorrect. Natural selection, sexual selection, same shit. I had made the point that natural selection is just one of the driving forces when it comes to evolution. The primary one now has been genetic drift. So it actually got switched over. Natural selection is a secondary mover.
Yeah, that's what Aaron Noah was saying as well. It's not my topic of expertise, but he was also saying genetic drift if as you say, if not in line with certainly one of the main, if not the main one, and you're saying now it is the main one. But notice that he asked a different question. What's the mechanism? That wasn't the claim that you were making. This was the definition of evolution. But you see going down this route how it becomes a rabbit trail with this guy, and it's just not helpful, right? The other people are not really following it. I mean, look at Darren Hamza. He's got his hand in his head there. He can't really follow what's going on. I'm not sure that anybody else can. What they hear though is Subboor sounds like an expert to the gullible ear, and that's all that happens here, right? If you go and ask anybody who watched this stream, what was it that was said and why do you believe it's true, you wouldn't find a single one of the people who are watching be able to articulate that in any meaningful way. And that should say a lot, right?
Yeah, you actually couldn't, because I went back into the Discord channel there after all of this, and people came on and they go, "Oh, Subboor completely destroyed you." I'm like, Subboor didn't address a damn thing I said. What are you talking about? Were you even listening?
That's what I love, right? When somebody says somebody's destroyed somebody, I'm like, okay, what was it that he said, and why do you agree with it? Just ask those two questions of anybody who said they're destroyed, and wait to see if you hear just even a coherent, let alone substantial, but a coherent response. Unless
I did that, and they couldn't give me a damn thing. They were like, "Well, he said this," and that, but I corrected him when I said this.
What did Subboor say? What did Subboor say?
Oh, I brought up Darwin's prediction for. Get this. This whole thing, this entire tangent, was nothing more than me trying to give an example between trying to explain what a prediction is and what seeing evidence in the future is. That's it. And he went down this irritating rabbit hole of nonsensical stupidity.
What's there to it? You have a scientific model. If this model is accurate, what would the universe look like?
Yeah.
And then you see if it looks like that.
Correct. Yeah. Right. That's what Cloud was trying to explain. And he used an example from evolution, because that's Subboor's favorite hobby horse, and Cloud wasn't aware of Subboor prior. Now they're going down this whole rabbit hole with evolution. And in future, and Cloud has done it, we'll use some other, thing that's, because all you want to show is the actual, like an example of, the prediction, one that's basically irrefutable. And now Subboor's gone off, and it's like chipping away at small little things, inconsequential things. He's now asking what the methodology is, the method is, I think was the term in evolution. And Cloud was just saying, here's what the definition of evolution is.
Science? No, because, well, it's, yeah. Fuck it.
All right, let's carry on a bit, yeah. I don't know, otherwise we'll never get done, yeah.
Play.
What was that?
No, play the video.
Okay.
Right now, the most common accepted one is called genetic drift, and there's a reason for this.
Okay, let me ask you the question again, because I'm not going to take you seriously as someone who studied evolutionary biology if you're going to say genetic drift was Darwin's main idea, right?
No.
I never ever say, see what's going on here, right? He asked you what was the mechanism. He didn't ask you what was Darwin's main mechanism. And now at the end, when you say genetic drift is the main mechanism of evolution, maybe in his mind, and I'm trying to be charitable as I can, maybe in his mind, evolution all revolves around Darwinian evolution. And if Darwin didn't say it, then it's not part of evolution, or it's not the main driving force by Darwin's idea. But who follows Darwin's idea today, right? So you gave the idea of what the main mechanism is today, and he then strawmans that and claims that, hey, that wasn't Darwin's main mechanism. At no point did you claim that it was.
Exactly.
We believe in certain aspects of the scientific miracles of the origin of species, right? But I mean, Darwin was a Victorian era thinker, anyways. I mean, there's discoveries and refinements that have come after that.
Big time.
I mean, nobody looks back at Darwin as the pinnacle of scientific discovery. He had one great idea, and if he had many bad ideas, that doesn't preclude one good idea, right? But again, he's making. Let's just see how he tries to get out of this now, because he thought, or he's made the claim that he's not going to take you seriously because you're claiming, according to him, that genetic drift was Darwin's main idea. Where the hell did he get this from?
What was Darwin's mechanism? His main mechanism.
Darwin's mechanism.
Darwin's mechanism?
Yeah.
Natural selection.
Thank you. That's
Okay, now look at this, right? And this is what I want. And Cloud, you here, so but you've seen it now, right? This is the disingenuousness of this guy, right? Thank you, as if he's made some point. He's made 0 point at all here. He's mischaracterized you when he asked you the question, and I'm beginning to think that he knows that he's doing this. It's not that he's. And maybe, Detective Inspector Monkfish might say to me, no, Rob, he really is this clueless. Again, I'm open to that being the case, right? He's now saying thank you as if you have justified something. All you've said is what everybody about Darwin knows, that natural selection is his main mechanism. But at no point did you claim that it wasn't. And he's now saying thank you as if he's made a significant point. And the gullible audience who have absolutely no idea what's going on will think, wow, Subboor's amazing. So can you see the action as well? This is all part of the propaganda rhetoric that this guy employs to make it look like he's done something when he's in fact said nothing of consequence.
Cloud, can you do us a favor and briefly explain genetic drift? What is genetic drift, Cloud?
Okay. So genetic drift being the primary mover, a really good example of it, let's say you have worms all over the sidewalk. Okay. And you can have a mix of everything that actually has extreme positive. Cloud looks like a young and slip Matt Dillahunty. Slim.
I just thought that was amusing. Go on, man. Give us a short description because we're going off topic, but it's nice to know anyway.
Yeah. So you have a bunch of worms on the sidewalk. You have some that actually have negative mutated traits within its genes, and you have, let's say, 50-50. Okay. So genetic drift is, let's say, a bicycle goes by and kills off like 70%. And all that's left is the negative mutated traits. Well, those negative mutated traits are going to be the ones that propagate over the more dominant, more beneficial mutated traits because they're dead. Right. And then from there, you're going to get natural selection that then kicks in. Now, that's just kind of a rough example. If anybody wants, I can send them a link. But yeah.
Okay, cool.
So,
well, I was going to ask a quick follow-up question to that, but you kind of said it yourself. Yeah, even if Darwin didn't use the words genetic drift, and if he didn't understand even if he didn't understand the genetic mechanisms of it, yeah, genetic drift, natural selection, they go together. Like
Darwin was talking about genetic drift could be the main driver. Yeah, so genetic drift is currently the primary mover, and the reason for that is you can actually have, without natural selection taking effect, genetic drift still occurs, and that's why it's been put as the primary mover and natural selection as a secondary mover.
We should have
like the thing is, like the definition you gave for genetic drift entails natural selection anyways.
Afterwards, yes, because natural selection is just to sum it up, is when they say it's survival of the fittest, just means that your genes are more fit to adapt to your environment. Now, if you wipe out anyone who's got, like, say, a really good example of this, you have white and black moths, right? Because this actually occurred. So now you have a forest of white trees, but now genetically, the white moths would actually be better suited for that environment. But now a whole bunch of crows come in and eat up all of the white moths and leave the black moths. While they do have not as much, like the black moths don't have the better suited genes for that environment, but because the white moths got killed off with the stronger genes, the black moths are going to be the one to propagate.
Propagate, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. That's what genetic drift is. So genetic drift is the one that's the primary mover. Natural selection will kick in after the fact. But we know this because you can actually have these things occurring without natural selection. And that's why it was switched over. That wasn't there in Darwin. Well, I don't think it was really known so much in Darwin's day. That's why at that time, natural selection was the primary mover.
All right, cool.
That went too
deep. That's all I was trying to get to. Okay. However, natural selection.
Natural selection.
One second. Natural selection as a mechanism, is it something that evolutionary biologists dispute about today? Because some of them are trying.
Now he's going off on a complete rabbit trail. Is there dispute over natural selection? In other words, is there discussion over this? And I think you might say yes or no, or whatever the case is here. Completely irrelevant to the main point. Can you see how we've gone down a rabbit trail here? Because he wants you to go down something that is completely trivial and unimportant, so that he can get you to say yes on a couple of questions to make it look like he sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
Yep, all the time, and that's why I can shut him up.
Place it with an alternative. Is that true or not?
No, because there are different mechanisms for selection. You're not replacing natural selection. If I take sexual selection, does that take over and replace natural selection? No, they could work conjointly.
I don't think you're understanding my point. I'm not saying that it doesn't. Natural selection is the basic idea of survival of the fittest. I'm not speaking about that. I'm saying natural selection as an explanation to say the origin of body plans. Are you saying to me? Are you saying to me biologists today are happy with natural selection being the main driving force of evolution? They are biologists challenging it.
It is not the main driving force of evolution. I tried to explain that, but you jumped over it. The main driving force to evolution is genetic drift.
No, we're talking about Darwin.
Wait. That means that Darwin was wrong.
No, in that sense, yes, right? Because our knowledge base. No, you're sitting there.
Yeah, it's a case of I think you know what you mean, and because you said no, yes, right, he starts to laugh, because remember what this is, right? This is to try and show people that he knows what he's talking about when he doesn't, and if you misspeak, then they can all laugh, because then to the gullible audience it sounds like, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Obviously, in your mind, you're trying to say how it is. And when you say yes, no, this sounds like to them like you don't know what you're talking about, which is, but can you see how he reacts, right? I pay attention to what's actually going on here in the background. What's the whole point of the stream? The stream is not to have an intellectually honest conversation. As long as we understand that's the case here, then we know how to deal with these people.
I have a quick question, Rob.
Go for it.
What does it mean to say that, genetic drift is like the main mechanism, or natural selection is the main mechanism? And what's the point in debating over that?
Again, that's a good question to ask him, right? Why do we go down this route? Because the original point was simply Cloud using an example here, and we've gone down a rabbit trail to talk about like a prediction being shown to be the case, or being, there is a prediction, and here's how it's been shown to be the case. And so he went down this trail. Well, here, this part wasn't shown to be true, and then it went down Darwin, because Darwin and Dawkins are his main hobby horses, and everybody apparently that's an atheist has to believe everything that Darwin said, or everything that Dawkins says, according to Subboor, right? And when it's shown that most of us don't accept everything that either of those guys say necessarily, then he just goes over this, right? Because in his mind, it's like they are the prophets for atheism. And I'm sure he's used those words at one or two of points in one of his streams anyway. So he comes with this idea. And so if you don't accept everything, then either you're clueless, or they're wrong, and why aren't you accepting that they're wrong?
What you just did, you just said things, and that's all I need. You said that was Darwin's main idea, and you said it's no longer valid. Thank you.
No, I did not say it's no longer valid. That's a misrepresentation of my position.
Didn't you say it's not the main mechanism?
I said it's not the main driving mechanism. It is a mechanism. There's a difference.
Didn't Darwin believe natural selection was the main driving force?
No, because Darwin even knew about sexual selection. If you actually read his book in the Beagle, that's mentioned in there. So Darwin knew.
Notice how they're both interrupting you, right? But then claim when you interrupt them, hey, I let you speak, right? But you can see they're both trying to over talk you now, right? So again, it's just the typical old double standard.
Yeah. Wasn't what Charles Darwin was driving. You just changed your position now.
No, I didn't.
Oh, all right. Did Charles Darwin believe natural selection was a driving force of evolution? The main driving
Natural selection was a driving force.
No. Did Charles Darwin believe it's the main driving force?
Is the what?
Did Charles Darwin believe it was the main driving force?
Yes, at the time natural selection was accepted to be the main driving force. However,
he did.
In either case, it doesn't matter. How evolution? No, it really doesn't, because right now you've completely sidetracked the fact that even though at that time natural selection was the main driving force, they also knew about sexual selection. They also didn't currently know was genetic drift. Hang on. Whenever Charles Darwin made his prediction, and he said, even with natural selection, he knew that one species had shared similarities with others, and he also knew about Carus Linnaeus and his study inside of cladistics. So, do you know? Not to sound rude, do you know what cladistics are?
I hope so, because I'm doing a PhD in evolutionary biology. So perhaps.
Okay.
No, he's fucking not.
But again, the question to ask you, okay, can you explain it for the audience then? Because that's always helpful. If he says it is, the next question is, and I'm not sure he'll probably get out of it with you. I can't even remember. Actually, I don't think we did this part. That's why I'm trying to search my memory to go, did we go over this? What happened here? But a great question is, okay, could you elucidate it for the audience, please? Because most of them don't know. So that way, there's like pressure on him to actually say what it is to the audience, not that he has to prove it to you, but to his audience.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure he's not going to tell you what it is now. Let's see if I'm right.
I do. Wait, do you know what punctuated equilibrium is?
There we go. Okay. What happens here? We'll just shift the burden back to you. I'll tell you because I'm doing a PhD. I won't tell you what it is, which is if somebody is an expert, they're going to say, yeah, sure. And for your audience, just so that you guys are aware, right? That shows that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. No, these guys won't do that.
No. And then immediately reiterates punctuated. Can you see this? In no way are you trying to, or is he trying to have an honest conversation here?
No, and what really frustrates me is I'm more than willing to go about and give explanations, go into a little bit of detail to help the people learn. He just wants to shoot his mouth off and end it there. So, hang on.
I'm gonna have to head off.
Make my point.
We did say it has to go Cloud.
No, but Cloud, if you're going to ask condescending questions, like if I
Honestly,
Well, how the hell is it condescending if he doesn't know you?
Yeah, exactly. I brought that up with Hamza.
And Mike, your lights, Cloud, you probably don't think that he knows a lot anyway, but you might not have said that, but at least you're asking the question, and all you had to do was say, hey, yeah, I'm studying it, and here's what it is, right? Oh, cool, great.
Yeah.
Now I know that you know what it is, great. But instead of doing that, he dodges the point.
Oh, no, yeah, exactly. When you don't know who he is, it's like, you be polite, ask, because if you don't know, maybe we can have a bit of discussion on it, see if we agree. But it's like,
this is nothing against you because you didn't know the guy. And if I don't know somebody, I always take a charitable position, right? If I don't know anybody, I'll go, okay, I'm speaking to somebody and I'm pretty sure I take them to be honest. I want to have an open conversation until I find out they don't. Now, in his case, I know that he doesn't. So it's not a case of like, I have to think about this because we've been through many students. I've had an interaction with him. I know it's not the case that he wants to have an intellectual, honest conversation. And so there's a different way of dealing with somebody like this. But of course, you are taking a charity and thinking or hoping, that this is intellectually honest. And in the heat of the moment, it's not always easy to see it, but I guess now when you look back, you go, okay, no chance you're going to have an intellectually honest conversation with him in particular.
The thing is, I knew a lot of what he was saying. He really didn't know what the hell it is he was actually talking about. He was just talking out his ass. So before we go into an actual deeper discussion into something, let's make sure you actually know what the hell you're saying, because then there's no point in me going into it, right? I'm no fucking PhD. But you sound like an idiot when you talk to me. And I'm not going to go down an entire conversation if you don't even understand the basic fundamentals. And the whole thing is, well, you don't know about punctuated equilibrium. Who cares? Really, who cares?
It's just a shifting of the goalposts so that you don't have to answer a question.
Yeah, no. So
everybody,
I think Cloud, let me just stop you a second.
You didn't know about it. I'm not going to take you seriously from that.
Just 1 second. Cloud, just listen a second. Yeah?
Do I know you and do I know your
Cloud. What will help your position? Cloud, please listen. What will help you is wait until we do the stream on Darwinian evolution. Yeah? And then you'll understand the position we're coming from. And then you can argue against that position, because you're trying to argue against a position that you don't even know our position is.
No, that's why I'm trying to ask. And whenever
but that's not the stream.
Yes, we're talking about science. The
no,
bring that up.
That's not the stream, though. That's what I'm saying to you.
But you can also see here that Hamza has no clue now where we are as well, right? He's also been lost he's been hypnotized by this rabbit trail that's gone down here. Because if he wasn't, he'd go, okay, yeah, I know why you went down this route, Cloud, because you wanted to give an example of a prediction made in science. I understand. Okay, let's bring it back to that now, right? But because he's been hypnotized so much, he has no idea. He thinks that you came on here to talk about evolution. That's how hypnotized he is at this stage.
You're trying to assume our position and argue against it.
No, there's a fundamental reason I brought up the Darwin's prediction, right? And then I was completely missed. There's a reason I brought up Darwin's prediction, because you were saying, how can you test or observe, or what is it, test future observations? I'm like, you can't. That's actually called a prediction. So you predict something, you go and test it, and if you find the prediction to have been valid, then the actual premise is correct. Yeah, I actually had to read the entire thing.
Sorry?
Right there, I had to explain the entire thing because you missed it. I'm like, no, there's a reason why I did
Yeah.
that, and you're just fucking right over your head. Like,
Yeah, but because it's gone down such a rabbit trail, right? He wasn't remembering what the initial point was, and that's why, in particular Subboor, but a few of these other apologists are so slippery because they take it down a rabbit trail away from the main point, especially if they come up against somebody that they see can actually answer the questions. Then they're looking for it's probing for a weakness to go down a rabbit trail where they can lead the conversation to ultimately go, thank you very much. That's all I was waiting for, on a trivial point, as if that anything's been said and nothing of importance has been, right? And this is just to look good to the audience because they are just as hypnotized as Hamza. And like you say, Cloud, the evidence is they come to you afterwards and say he schooled you. And if you ask them, what was it that he schooled you and why do you think that's the case? You won't get a single response. And that tells you everything about the hypnotized people in this particular case.
yeah.
So you're taking a Popperian view. You're saying a theory is correct if the prediction is confirmed. So that's
if there is sufficient evidence to support a conclusion.
But that's you're basically taking Popper's view that if a prediction is confirmed, the theory is true.
No, but it's one thing. I'm saying a body of facts, right?
That is not
body of
Popper's view.
Yeah, I don't know who Poppers is, and he doesn't seem to understand how
Karl
science.
Popper is a philosopher of, is it biology or philosopher of science, isn't it, Jan?
Yeah, but Popper had the falsification principle of meaning, the falsification criteria.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Not the verification one.
Yeah, so you got it confused, right?
Verifiable facts. So you don't just take one proposition, one particular thing. None of you take many. Right? Evolution isn't true because of Darwin. God, that would be insanity. If you're taking biology, you know that evolution entails many different fields of study, not just one. Right? That's why we don't just take one on board.
Fine. But I'm just asking conceptually. You're saying Darwin's predictions were confirmed, therefore his theory is true. That's what you're saying. From all the different fields, genetics, biochemistry, cladistics, bioinformatics, whatever it is. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that Darwin's predictions validated that claim.
Okay.
Right? Other things have come in later on.
Let's go back.
Notice how he interrupts you so that you cannot clarify your point here. This is the other thing that happens, right? They're looking for sound bites, and when you want to clarify a point, he just talks over you. Because you would have, I think, probably quite accurately characterized what you meant by what you just said there, but he just talks over you at this point.
Yeah, but that's what they do.
He's got in his mind a point that he wants to make, and as soon as you start speaking or you say a little bit more than he wants, he'll just interrupt because he wants to get to. There's a point that he's going towards, and that's what he wants to get. It's kind of like them, going backwards from God. Hey, how do I demonstrate that God's true? Okay, so I start with a point that God's true. I throw out anything that might disconfirm that, and I look for things that might confirm that. And he's got the same sort of thing in his mind here of trying to get to a point, right? And then just over talking you when he thinks you might not be saying something that's going towards his point.
Yeah.
Let's go back, right? So if that's what you're saying, then you also have to conceptually, I'm not saying in terms of evidence, conceptually agree. If Darwin made predictions which were falsified, then his theory can't be correct. Conceptually.
Yes.
Okay, gradualism is a prediction that he made, and he made it the bedrock of his theory, and we have punctuated equilibrium, which you didn't know about, which challenges it.
No.
You can do it.
So,
I need to.
You asked how, and his response was, you can look it up yourself. I need to go now. So I'll make a claim, and then off I'll go, and I won't explain myself, and you can look it up, because you might not have known exactly what punctuated equilibrium is, and I've made a claim that I haven't backed up, and I'll just excuse myself now.
Oh, yeah.
So Rob, 2 points. Punctuated equilibrium are periods of relatively rapid evolution. They take millions of years, usually anyways, but, relatively speaking, that's not a long time. But, and two, technically the model that Darwin was operating with has been falsified, but we have more modern models today about evolution that have passed the test.
The only good thing I take from Darwin is common descent. That's it, because that's really all you need.
You Muslims have to understand that Darwin was a Victorian era thinker. He had ideas that are obsolete in the 21st century. and that's okay. We don't think he was an infallible prophet.
Oh,
Yeah.
he was our prophet.
Yeah, but you can see how he keeps going back to Darwin, right? It's the same thing. He'll look for somebody in the past, and if you take part of Darwin's theory and you go, okay, that's still valid today, but the other parts have been superseded or shown to be wrong, he lumps it all together when it suits him, and then he'll split it up when it suits him again. So you just got to pay attention. It's not always easy, right? Because it's a bit of rapid fire going on here, but there's an inconsistency here as well. So he's claiming that if it's the case that gradualism, if it were the case, and that's disputable because Detective Inspector Monkfish was saying it might not be the case, but if it were the case that it was somehow falsified, that doesn't mean that natural selection or common descent was falsified. And so, but he wants to wrap it all into one thing and say, hey, well, if this part was falsified, oh, well, then his whole theory is falsified. And that's just not the case, right?
Well, that's
Like-
it. And that's what I mean earlier when I said, like, okay, fine. But then what you have to do then is to remain consistent. You have to apply that to everything. So Einstein was wrong about everything.
Like here's how evolution has occurred throughout the history of life. There's periods of rapid evolution, punctuated equilibrium. There's periods of stasis, relatively little evolution in a long period of time. And then there's periods of gradual evolution over long periods of time, right?
It pretty much boils down to how does the environment change how rapidly and what species can done.
But all of this was unnecessary, right? If we'd stuck to the main point and he hadn't gone down this rabbit hole. And it's a thing for future. If either of you guys ever speak to him again, just don't talk about evolution, right? Because you'll just end up going down this rabbit hole. Talk about science, cosmology, philosophy, morals, ethic, anything else, right, that he doesn't have any clue on. Because then he doesn't have this ability to take you down the rabbit hole. Or at least it's much easier to stop it a lot quicker.
I thought about it afterwards. I'm like, I should have gone down cosmology because he just derailed the crap out of it.
Yeah. He wouldn't be able to do it with cosmology, right? He has no clue about that. And in fact, when he had a debate with a guy called Skydive Phil in Speaker's Corner, who has got more expertise on cosmology, he's not a professional cosmologist, but he's a very avid amateur. He reads the papers. He's gone and interviewed. If you go look at his channel, he's gone to interview many of the leading guys like Alan Guth, Alexander Vilenka, and I was with him when we interviewed Roger Penrose and these sort of guys. He ended up not wanting to debate Skydive Phil on cosmology, right? He said it had to be evolution. And even on evolution, if you go watch that debate on Speaker's Corner, Skydive Phil came with all the information, right? The debate live on Speaker's Corner was I think something like, is humans descended from chimps, or do chimps and humans have a common ancestor? I think that was the debate, or words to that effect, right? And go and watch that and see what happens there. But this is just a rabbit hole, right?
Well, that's it. But he even went up against Aaron Ra, and Aaron was bringing up, because I mean, Aaron's thing is cladistance, right? And he knows his shit when it comes to that. And he was bringing this stuff up against Subboor. And Subboor was just dumbfounded, and he just kept trying to ignore all of that and only stick to the philosophy. So if you know the science, he'll stick to philosophy. If you don't know the science very well, he only wants to address the science because he might know, like, an extra word or two than you do.
Yeah, and to be fair, though, Aaron is not good on philosophy. He doesn't like it and doesn't know much about it, and that's not helpful as well. And actually, he did quite badly against Subboor in Speaker's Corner one time. He appeared there. Nobody knew he was coming, or at least none of us seemed to know. And somehow Subboor got a call from the Muslims, and he made his way down to Speaker's Corner and then started to talk about philosophy, which was not Aaron's strong point, and Aaron allowed that to happen. And the debate didn't look good purely because Aaron doesn't know anything about, or very little about, philosophy, and he allowed Subboor to take him down that route, and that didn't sort of end up looking particularly good.
All
right. Okay, so here's what. So Detective Inspector Monkfish has read a fair amount on this. Punctuated equilibrium is opposed on a certain type of gradualism called phyletic gradualism, which is not the relevant sense of gradualism that Darwin committed to. Okay, so again, there's more nuance to this. Gradualism in the Darwinian sense means by graduation. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the pace of evolution. Okay, I don't know much about that, so I'll leave it at that point. Let's see how much further we've got to go here. I think hopefully he goes at this moment in time. You can speak to Darren for a little while.
If you want to skip him and go directly to just me and him, that'd be awesome.
I think we're just about there now, hopefully.
Go read about what Darwin said about gradualism, and go read what Stephen Jay Gould says about punctuated equilibrium.
But when he makes those claims, or can't you tell me what they said? What do you think they said, right? Or claims like this. With him, the biggest thing that needs to be done is ask him questions and get him to elucidate them. And on the rare occasions when this is done by people, and some of the other streams that we've reviewed, he dances around this, right? He's again become very adept at not answering questions or not going into depth. And when Detective Inspector Monkfish, the guy that was on here, who had read a fair amount on the philosophy, etc., went in and had this debate, we actually did a review of that. He danced around and it was comical. So because immediately he found out that somebody knew about the philosophy side of it, right? Because maybe that wasn't your strong point. Yours is the science, Cloud, and so he wants to talk about philosophy. But as soon as somebody came on that knew all of the things that he'd read, then it just didn't end well for him at all, right? Because somebody actually knows what they're talking about, and that's when.
Rob, honestly, Subboor has not read any book on any of these topics that he's talking about. Otherwise, he wouldn't.
Yes, either. I think what has happened is he's gone to find some quotes. He's gone to Christian websites. He's found some quotes. He's gone to take a little bit out of a book. He doesn't say that's what he's doing, and so he says, "Hey, when somebody says X in the book, which he's got from some Christian site because he hasn't read the entire book, then it gives the impression that he's read this book. At no point does he say, "Hey, I'm taking this little book. This is the only bit I've read out of this book, and I'm taking that because I want to make this point." He never says that. So it sounds like he's read these things when in fact he's just picked up certain quotes from certain books from other people that he might be following.
But like, for example, if Subboor told me that, Darwin and Gould had a disagreement, which is what he's saying, I would ask him, well, what did Darwin and Gould believe in? And the thing is, they both believed in evolution, but Gould had some issues with older Darwinian ideas.
Yeah, but as we heard earlier, Subboor doesn't even accept that evolution, like just evolution, like disregarding the theory, so how evolution happens, the explanation to it, he doesn't even know that evolution is just mutations passed down. That's it. Mutations happen, they're passed down. And he flat out said earlier, nope, that's not it. And I'm like, then I don't know what you're talking about. We're talking about two different things.
Is that what you really said?
Yeah, I actually defined evolution because it didn't seem like and I was like, look, evolution is summarily defined as descent with inherent genetic modifications, which can just be said as there is mutations in the alleles that are passed down from parent stock to further lineages and so on and so forth. And he's like, I'm like, do you agree? And he's like, no. And I'm like, what? I don't know what we're talking about anymore.
Yeah, and then he went into the mechanism. Instead of accepting that was the main definition, he then sidetracked into the mechanisms.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. I'm not sure we're going to get to the whole of it. Maybe we could do it as a part 2 at some point, but I don't think we're going to get the second part of the Darren thing. I'm just looking. That's another half an hour, and that would take us another hour or more to review. So there we go. By the way, Subboor gets the stuff from the Discovery Institute. So that's where he gets the information. So it's not like he necessarily needs to read the book. He can just go and take quotes from these sort of things.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, it's okay. Cloud, you did a good job. For the most part, I think I kind of disagree with your definition of evolution. But I mean, Subboor made so many basic bitch mistakes, right? That, it's fucking embarrassing. Like, yeah, you're not going to miss that. Like, the audience isn't going to miss out much if we don't continue with this.
Are you kidding? Because the second half, when I go against Hamza, we're not talking about evolution. When I go against Hamza, we are specifically addressing his religion and his belief.
All right, you know what I'm going to do, Cloud? I think we'll keep this then. I'm going to keep the timer. I'm going to keep this entire video because we're after 10 now. What I think we'll do is we'll do this as a part 2 then. I'll speak to Stops. Either we can do it next week because I think that'll probably be a good idea, just so we can do that second part. And then you can come on again if you like next week. I just think otherwise it's going to go on for such a long time. I want to keep it to around 2 hours, a little over. So if you like, then we'll do that for next week. So on that note, hopefully that's been good for everybody. We'll do a part 2 on this then, I think, where we go with the second part where Cloud and Hamza have a conversation. It's not about evolution, which hopefully people will be happy about. But let me finish off the show then just with a hadith. And I'm going to just bring up a shorter one here. And so this is from Sahih Bukhari, 2542, Book 49, Hadith 26. And here's what it says. I saw Abu Said and asked him about coitus interruptus. Well, I'll talk about what that is at the end, for those who don't know. Abu Said said, we went with Allah's apostle in the, I can't pronounce it, so please, I apologize, Ghazwa of Banini al-Mastalik, I think something like that, and we captured some of the Arabs as slaves, and the long separation from our wives was pressing us hard, and we wanted to practice coitus interruptus. We asked Allah's messenger whether it was permissible, and he said, quote, it is better for you not to do so. No soul which Allah has destined to exist up to the day of resurrection, but will definitely come into existence. Now, what this essentially means is that, they'd captured these Arab women as slaves, and coitus interruptus is having sex and withdrawing before you ejaculate. And so they then asked Muhammad, what should we do about this? And he said, whether this was permissible. And he says, better for you not to do so. In other words, better for you that you don't do the coitus interruptus. In other words, better that you ejaculate in the woman, because no soul destined to exist up to the day of resurrection, but will definitely come into existence. So in other words, Allah knows whether the soul will come into existence or not. And so don't worry about this. Go ahead and do this. So that's one of the hadiths that is often used to show that it's fine to rape your slaves. Because the word rape necessarily isn't in the Quran in that specific word. But if you take what your right hand possesses and then you take a hadith like this and you put the two together, then you can come to the idea about rape. So that was just one of those many hadiths that's often talked about. I've got a few other ones, but they were much longer. So on that note of unpleasantness, I want to thank my co-hosts for tonight, Cloud and Rogue, aka Yal, for joining us. And James SC is in the chat there. James is a wealth of information. He's got all the references, etc. If you want to learn more about Islam with the references immediately, then always join James. And also, by the way, just so know, we'll go over to Discord now. So let me just post the Discord link so people can have a chat there and continue chatting. Here's the Discord link there, and I'm posting it now in the chat. These guys already are on the Discord server, but if you aren't, there's the link. Join us and we can have a further conversation. So last couple of words from each of you guys, and then we'll bring the show to a close.
Come to Discord and worship me.
So when I joined the chat, you guys were talking about a verse in the Quran that says that anything that happens to believers is decreed by Allah. So sorry, the Chinese communists do what Allah decrees.
Yeah, so exactly. If everything is a test, then it's almost like, what's the point of doing anything? Because whether you do something or not do something, it's a test, and it's all been ordained anyway. So, but then again, of course, the Muslims will tell us that we have some sort of libertarian free will. And on that contradictory note, as again, I'd like to thank my co-panelists for tonight. Thanks to Cloud and to Carl and Oyal, should I say. And we'll be back next week, Friday, same time, 8 p.m. UK time, and hopefully stop spamming with us to host it, and I'll be the co-host. And on that note, thank you guys. Thank you to all the viewers. Join us on Discord, and we'll see you again next time, this time next week on the Friday. Good night, everybody.